The fight headlining UFC 290 this weekend will be Alexander Volkanovski versus Yair Rodriguez for the Featherweight Championship, and I think this matchup is going to be super interesting, especially stylistically. I think Yair Rodriguez, with his very unorthodox, high volume, lots of kicks, against a guy like Volkanovski, who is coming down from the lightweight division, which going into the featherweight division will be a different speed here, because lightweight is going to be a little bit slower. Featherweight's just going to be a little bit faster in general. So we'll see how that matchup kind of collides here. This is a very scary matchup for Volkanovski. He is a minus 435 favorite. Yair Rodriguez is a plus 325 underdog in this matchup. So that does get me a little nervous here, because plus 325 is quite a bit. But I think the bookies just don't want people betting on Volkanovski in this fight, which is understandable. This will be a fun fight, I believe, especially with Volkanovski coming off his last matchup against Islam Makhachev, which was a very close matchup. It looked really good in that matchup. A lot of people did write him off a little bit. I think even I did a little bit more. I thought he was going to get finished by Islam, but he just had tons of grit. He's very skilled, showed why he is one of the best UFC fighters in the world. And Islam Makhachev is no joke, especially at lightweight with that distinct weight advantage over Volkanovski. And Volkanovski brought it to Islam, made it a very close fight. A lot of people did think Volkanovski won the fight. I think it could go either way, but it was a very, very entertaining fight, especially because Volkanovski held such a great challenge to him moving up. So before then, he did beat Max Holloway in their third fight pretty distinctly. Like he made it clear that he beat Max Holloway, especially after those first two fights. The second one being super close, could have gone either way. I thought Volkanovski won all three of those fights, but 2-1. I guess 2 was a little bit more close, but 1 was close as well. But I thought 1 was clear Volkanovski, 2 could have gone either way. Third one was very definite from Volkanovski. So he looked really good on the feet in that matchup. Absolutely outclassed Holloway for 5 rounds in that one. Destroyed the Korean Zombie in their matchup. Was not a very fun fight to watch if you're a Korean Zombie fan. Absolutely made a masterpiece out of him, basically. He was doing so much on the feet against the Korean Zombie. Looked really good in that matchup. And then brutalized Brian Ortega in their matchup again. Brian Ortega had like 2 little moments in there with like a triangle and a guillotine. But Volkanovski was able to get out of there. I think he even got like a 10-8 round in one of the rounds, maybe 2. Absolutely destroyed Brian Ortega in that matchup. And then the Max Holloway split decision in their second fight, which was super close. But I did think Volkanovski did win that matchup. Before Yair Rodriguez coming off a win against Josh Emmett for that interim title fight at featherweight. He did win by triangle. I think it was more of Emmett falling into his triangle than anything, but for Yair Rodriguez, looked really good in that matchup, had a really high pace, threw a lot of body kicks over a guy, Josh Emmett, who I think is pretty solid. Maybe you could argue that he probably shouldn't have been in that position with his fights with Ige and Cater, but it was still a good win nonetheless. Looked really good in that matchup, especially for Yair Rodriguez. Beat Brian Ortega, won that one due to like a shoulder injury from Brian Ortega injuring himself, but he was beating up Ortega pretty badly in that matchup, but it sucks that it did have to end to an injury, especially very early on in that fight, because Ortega was on the ground with him, and we don't really know what that would have looked like. So Max Holloway, he did lose to Max Holloway by decision. Looked pretty good in that matchup. Max Holloway had to look for some takedowns, looked really good on the feet, and we saw what Volkanovski was able to do to Max Holloway on the feet. So a little bit of MMA math, but he did look really good in that matchup, which is why I think this matchup is going to be really entertaining. And then Jeremy Stevens about 4 years ago, his most recent ones obviously being Emmett, Ortega, and Holloway. So those are the 3 more important matchups than like a Stevens in general, but I think this matchup is going to be super entertaining. But for this matchup, how I think it'll go, I think early on Yair Rodriguez will have a lot of success on the feet. I think he's going to try and overwhelm Alexander Volkanovski with his high pace, just come at him with the kicks, especially how he did it against Josh Emmett. Land some of those kicks, go forward a little bit more, kind of circle out of the more bigger counter shots of Volkanovski. But I think he's just going to try and go at him and try and move Volkanovski a little bit off his kilter, especially after coming down from lightweight. I think he's going to try and do that. I think he hurts Volkanovski in the first round. I think Volkanovski, I don't want to say survives, but I think he grits it out towards the end of the first round. I think the second round will probably be a little bit slower. I think Volkanovski's going to be a little bit more defensive, kind of just do the right things fight IQ wise. He'll probably look for some takedowns, especially towards the end of the round, just so he knows he can get it. Because I think in the first round, I think he'll try and go for a takedown, but it'll be a little bit messy, get back to his feet, and Yair is just going to try and capitalize, throw a lot of body kicks, and just try and get him there. And I think Volkanovski's going to be able to endure that first round. Second round is going to be a little bit closer. Maybe Yair does win it. Again, I think it's just going to be super close. It's just going to be more point-wise. Yair is going to try and circle around. Volkanovski's going to try and land some punches, get the reach down, figure out the distance of Yair, and then get the takedown towards the end of that round. And I think 3, 4, and 5 are going to be very interesting because I think Volkanovski's going to be able to look for some takedowns, get better on the feet, because I think there's going to be a little bit of an adrenaline dump after that first round for Yair Rodriguez, because you have that big crowd around you. You're going to be at a high pace trying to finish up Volkanovski in that first round. I think it's going to be a little bit of an adrenaline dump. Volkanovski's going to look for takedowns. Yair's going to tire out on the ground because of those takedowns, and I think 3, 4, and 5 are going to get a little bit easier for Volkanovski, especially on the feet. 71.5-inch reach advantage, not reach advantage, 71.5 inches of reach for Volkanovski, 71 inches for Yair, so half-inch reach advantage for Volkanovski. So a very similar reach, especially with the height difference. That is kind of interesting. But for Volkanovski, I think he gets to stand up down a little bit more. He doesn't have the chin of Max Holloway, so you can't really compare the striking with how much Max does take in his fights with the striking that Volkanovski does. Volkanovski is just at a different level on the feet. And I think he's going to be able to land some good shots on Yair. Josh Emmett was able to land some really good shots on Yair Rodriguez. Yair Rodriguez does this thing where he doesn't really have his guard up in his matches. He kind of just tries to move his head out of the way, and it doesn't really work too well. And Josh Emmett was able to land a really good shot right before getting finished. And I think Volkanovski, if Emmett can land a pretty clean punch on him, I think Volkanovski can do it, especially as the fight goes on, where we'll see a little bit more of a tired Yair Rodriguez. He's going to be trying to defend the takedowns because I think Volkanovski will try to put that threat in there. Volkanovski's going to mix in some of the takedowns. I think he's going to look really good on the feet. He's going to be a little bit more defensive, figure out what Yair Rodriguez is going to try and do to him as the fight goes on. And I think he does win this one by decision. Maybe he gets hurt and falls into a triangle, kind of like Josh Emmett does. But I don't see Yair Rodriguez submitting Volkanovski, especially with how tough Volkanovski is. We saw that in the Ortega fight. And I just don't think Yair Rodriguez, although he did show a little bit of a good ground game against Emmett, just getting the triangle in and that aspect, I don't think it's going to happen on Volkanovski here. I think Volkanovski toughs it out grapples him on the ground, does better on the feet as the fight goes on. I don't see Yair Rodriguez submitting him. Maybe he finishes him early on in this fight, but again, I just think the grappling, the adrenaline dump out of the first round, I think will eventually tire out Yair Rodriguez, and I think Volkanovski just imposes his will on him in the stand-up and on the ground. I don't think Rodriguez does submit him on the ground. He got the submission against Josh Emmett, but Josh Emmett was kind of rocked going into his triangle. He literally went into his triangle and he was able to get it in. So good on Rodriguez for getting it, but it wasn't like he just out-grappled him to get there. I think, if anything, a Volkanovski might TKO him in like the 4th or 5th round, like a tired Yair Rodriguez, where he just takes too many punches and it kind of ends that way. Or I think Volkanovski will win this one by decision. So I think it could be a 48-47, maybe 49-46 if Volkanovski does win the second round. But that's how I have this fight. I think it's going to be a super fun fight early on, but I think Volkanovski will start to figure it out, start to land some really good shots, and I think we'll see the Volkanovski that we're used to seeing later on in this fight. But I think Yair Rodriguez does kind of get his 2 cents in there, does kind of get his licks early on in this fight, and I think Volkanovski does end up coming back to win this matchup by decision. For this matchup, it is a little bit concerning, but I am going to ride with Volkanovski by decision. Volkanovski being a minus 435 favorite and Yair Rodriguez being a plus 325 underdog does kind of worry me a little bit here. I think a lot of people on Tapology are taking Volkanovski in this matchup, which is a little bit of a worry as well. I think a lot of people just honing in on Volkanovski makes me a little bit worried because Yair is a good style to fight against Volkanovski. And I think, 88% of people are taking Volkanovski on Tapology, 12% are taking Rodriguez, 70% within that 88% are taking Volkanovski by decision. So I am a little bit worried in that way, where I think the bookies are kind of pounding on Volkanovski with the minus 400 and 88% on Tapology. I am a little bit worried picking Volkanovski in that way, but I think he's just going to be too tough, especially getting out of that first round. We saw it in the Islam fight. I think he just imposes himself as the fight goes on. I think he gets better as the fight goes on, and you'll see a little bit more of that fight IQ from Alexander Volkanovski start to take over. I think he wins 3, 4, and 5, wins this fight. Let me know what you guys think of this video. Let me know who you guys have in this matchup, and I'll see you guys next time.